Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Mulder, and tonight I'm going to have a very special conversation with Mobius. He is the chief IT guy for Joshua P. Warren, and he and I we've known each other for years now, and we've talked about all kinds of weird things, including the radionics and what have you. And through our many conversations, we've discussed certain things that back up the double slit experiment, and also just quantum computers, that kind of a thing. Because I really have this fascination with with quantum computers and the world of the quantum. And with that said, hello Mobius, how you doing this fine evening?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, and it's nice to talk to you.
Oh, same here, same here. How are you guys recovering from the havoc or the little storm we had back in the beginning of October?
Well, my street outside has a gully that's about 9 feet deep, but they finally managed to replace the phone lines and the cable lines and everything. So we're beginning to get back to normal. What's it been like 2.5 months? And have actually cell phone service and things again here. So we took a pretty hard hit, and it's not been a lot of fun, but it's nice to be back and be fully online.
Yeah, well, when the lights went out down here, I had my trusty Sunshine Simple to kind of help me make it through the nights there, and it brought a little bit of the 21st century or the 20th century to me, because I mean, for the first few days, I barely had I had cell service. I think within 24 hours after the storm, and then after that, I think it was like within 2 hours or 2 days, I had. Started getting internet where I could check, emails, that kind of a thing. But yeah, I mean, it was a wake up call for me about how important it is to be prepared, and especially when it comes to power generation, food and that kind of a thing. And it's just those little moments there where you find holes in your system and you know what to do next time this thing happens, because it will happen. It's just the way life is. Just to be prepared, and it just seems to give me a sense of security. But yeah, I mean, like I said, once again, I want to thank you on the air for building that Sunshine Simple for me, because that really did help me get over the hump.
Well, I'm glad I was able to help you. There was a point that we sold thousands of these, and now I think there may be two left. If anybody asks at this moment, Homeland Security came during all of this and essentially bought everything up that wasn't nailed down for the emergency. So I didn't have a lot to sell. So if anybody happens to want power backup, like I said, there's two on this whole planet now that could be available. You could come and pay me a visit at sunshinesimple.com. And when the two sell out, that's it. There till some more are made and get over here and I can have the cases. I don't have anything to build a system out of. So I'm glad you got one, and I'm glad we all had power backup. And these things also are anti EMP. So if things really took a kind of a bad wonky turn, we would be able to still have power when nobody else had power. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
my state of the art.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, hell, I mean, I even got the pair of night vision goggles from you, and those things. I mean, that is, when it's completely dark out and you don't need any light, you just put on the goggles and you're able to see everything that's out there. I mean, it's incredible. And heck, I've even pointed those things up toward the sky and see strange things up in the sky, even where I'm at. And so, but it's these are the kind of things that you really that you, I guess, sort of your specialty when it comes to manufacturing. And what do you do with the night vision goggles? Is that more of a refurbish, or do you what what's your thing with that, with the night vision?
Once in a while, I can find lower cost Gen 2 Russian tubes, sell them, but because before they become almost impossible. So I mainly am building third gen US made night vision, and I build it by hand and customize it. It's way over mil spec and little specks in the sky. normally have spots or tubes, and I have to find, and it's kind of a needle in a haystack, the tubes that are as close to perfect as possible and optimize them for what we do. That's another, I get another URL, paratemporal, and that's ParaTempol.com. And so, if you're looking for drones or, like UFOs or satellites, this is the thing because nothing gets past in the sky. You see everything that passes over. So these things are a lot of fun. And also, like from a, like perspective of just protecting yourself, I don't think anything could get within, what, a quarter mile of you that you would not be able to see, even on a totally dark night. These things are really cool to have.
Yeah, I think the only warning that you have is do not point them toward artificial light because that will fry the tubes, correct?
Extremely. They're approximately 10,000 gain. So what to you might be a visible light, to these things would be just extremely bright. But you can see deep, deep into the universe and see things that you cannot imagine looking into the sky. But you don't point them at a street light or like any like man-made lights because it will actually burn the tube. And I have to go through that and tell people before they buy them because it's hard to find these tubes and we don't want anybody to tear them up.
Yeah, I mean that was the warning. I think you gave me that warning 3 times before I, when I, once I got them, and I live by it. So yeah, that's just the only thing I would tell people. These things work. They're fantastic, and I mean, just it gives you an advantage during, if there's any kind of social, we'll just say social discontent. These things will give you the advantage of escaping and keeping out of harm's way. And like I said, I'm a firm believer in preparedness, and that is part of my system is night vision. So, but anyway, now kind of switching gears here. You and I, we've had this conversation uh, about you know just observing things and changing them. And there was an experiment that you told me about, and I mean, apparently this is widely known throughout physics and what have you, about when you observe I think there's a certain mineral or whatever that as it decays, when you observe this mineral, it ceases to decay. There's no signs of radioactivity. Is this correct? Am I understanding this correctly?
But you nailed it. Talking about them, you know, you want me to give you the overview?
Please.
Okay, some scientists got a hold of an electron scanning microscope and they decided that it would be a lot of fun to watch a piece of uranium and look for the decay and the radioactive release. And they were like, this has never been documented. And so they sat and they watched, and they sat and they watched, and absolutely nothing happened. And they were like, well, this doesn't make sense. And they put a Geiger counter near it and they watched, and it ceased to be radioactive. And that simply means that it had no emissions and no activity. It became an inanimate object. So when you observe things, you break down their processes. They don't age, they don't decay, they don't behave normally when very closely observed. Their behavior just, it goes wonky. I get to use that word again. And so they discovered that during observation that there is no radioactivity in uranium. So if you want to look it up, and because this sounds pretty, far out, it's called the quantum Zeno effect, and is one of the coolest things that shows that reality can be influenced by observation. And so that is probably where you want to pick up.
Yes, you're correct, and that's one of the things, back there in the old days when I was, I think it's like within 1 or 2 years after I started working with Josh, and we were shipping out wish machines, and things are really, really, picking up, and I always got this question. And I even had the very same question: how in the hell does this stuff work? I even wrote to Charles Casamano before I ever became friends with him, and try to pick his brain. And his answer was, "I don't know," and that really wasn't sufficient because if you're dealing with an engineer or a scientist, and they ask you, "Well, how does this thing work?" You got to give them some kind of an answer that's in a textbook somewhere that's based upon real science. Because if not, they're going to look at you like you're a quack. And anyway, I tuned the machine for that very same question was how does radionics work? And within 2 weeks, I saw this little cartoon. Uh, it was about the double slit experiment, and it showed through this cartoon that when matter is observed or measured, it ceases. It behaves like matter, but when it is not observed or measured, it starts to behave like energy. In other words, it exists, but it doesn't really exist. It's sort of like in a I don't know how to put it. It's just it's just there, but it's not there. One way or the other. And I found this really interesting just by observing that you're collapsing the field, and this thing and quote unquote matter starts to behave as we think it does. And this came to a lot of questions for me about what is real. And also that this would explain radionics because the way I looked at radionics is an extension of the mind, an extension of consciousness, and when you tune these machines, they become a part of you, and they become observers, and they observe physical reality 24/7, and by the mere fact or the mere act of observing, they're able to change physical reality, just like observing uranium. What are your thoughts?
The experiment that you're talking about deserves anybody who wants to like see magic in action is Dr. Quantum double slit experiment. You find it on YouTube, and it shows reality behaving somewhat like magic. It does not behave like we would expect. And it shows there are many quantum experiments that things break down under observation and they simply do not behave as normal physics. They become what is called probability. There's even the potential to go back in time, potentially looking at a star from the light that's taken millions and millions of years to get here can cause changes in the past millions of years ago in that star. And all of these experiments show us that reality and consciousness, as we know it, is very different than we think it is on a kind of Einstein physics level. So, what you're talking about is using your device is the changes are being, taking place on a quantum level, is the way that you're interpreting it. And I don't have a better explanation. Now, I am not a quantum physicist, and I don't pretend to be. But what I am is somebody that sees 15 years of email that comes in on these wishing machines. And I have seen so few negative responses. And they're usually people that say, I knew it wouldn't work and it didn't work. And I've seen probably less than a handful, but I've seen, if not thousands, at least high hundreds of people that write in and say, the incredible exact intents that they set and that they absolutely had improbable things happen and their wish come true. So we have a money back guarantee. And by the way, I have nothing to do with making or selling these, nor do I profit from them. So my words are just coming from observation of you and Joshua and the people that are involved in this. They seem to work and they work very well and they work in ways that defy probability. So I can give you that feedback and that's as honest as I can be. I think they were probably a quantum device and I think the mind is the device that empowers them. And I am pretty sure that the human brain is a quantum device.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I totally agree. We're working on so many different levels. And the thing that gets me about quantum is that space and time are irrelevant. It truly is. And I was given the analogy the other week about if we were to think of the universe as a giant hologram, and basically what is a hologram? It's information in the form of a visual image, for example. All right. And the way I understand it, and please, correct me if I'm wrong. The way I understand it, if you had a hologram and you were to take a little sliver, a little piece of that hologram away, and you were to examine that little sliver, that you would see that complete hologram. In other words, a fraction is equal to the whole when it comes to the storage of information. Am I right or am I wrong on this one?
You nailed it. And I can actually give the example. Back in my college days, our professor had a hologram of his wife, and he had it projected in kind of a round kind of sci-fi looking thing. And he took out his holographic crystal, you would call it, I guess, that was done with a laser in her posting, and he broke off a small chip. And it would seem, pretty insignificant, but he used a very tiny laser and illuminated it, and he was able to project the whole image of her still from that tiny bit of crystal. And I can actually give you the reverse of that. There's something called the quantum ghost image. And you're like, well, what the heck is that? And here's the reverse of that. If you take light that is bent by time space as it comes around the sun, and you shine it through a prism and you use detectors, you can actually see what is hidden on the other side of the sun. Now, that may not sound important, but our military uses this phantom ghost technology, and they can see what is hidden under a tarp or behind, say, two windows or even one window, and can be done, using very advanced imaging technology. And you're like, this is insane. But part of the whole is carried in every proton that carries light. It also carries complete information. So that actually is just mind blowing because it does not fit what you would think as normal.
Um, Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. It's the damnedest thing. And so the point of this is that everything's connected. Everything's interconnected with everything else. Everything has within it the whole. It's part
Yeah.
of the whole, but it's also the whole itself. And that leads to so many different possibilities as to what reality truly is. And you know, it really it boggles the mind. And sometimes when you think about this, you just realize that you're living in an illusion. That this reality, that or what we call reality, it doesn't really exist. It exists, but it doesn't exist. So it, it's reality because we say it is. Your perspective, your reality is entirely different than mine or Joe Blow down the street because we look at things in a different way. We had a different environments and that kind of a thing. And so it's just interesting how reality truly works and how perception plays on reality. Uh, I know Einstein was famous for his one saying. I guess it could be a cruel universe or it could be a good universe, depending on your perspective. If memory serves, I probably butchered that, but neither here nor there. I think that's along the lines of what he said. And so, and again, it depends on the operator when it comes to these machines. How's the operator? What is this mindset? You know, does he have a clear vision of what it is he's trying to accomplish? And like you said, this person said, "Well, this doesn't work," or "I knew it wasn't going to work for me." And yeah, you're right. And if you said it was going to, that I know this is going to work for me, you'd be right again. It all depends on the operator themselves. It has nothing to do with anything else with the device. The device is a tool. It's like a car or a bicycle or radio or whatever. It's just a tool. It makes your life easier and more convenient, and that's what it's all about. And this kind of leads into the next phase of this, which is quantum computers. And you and I, we've had conversations about this, and also I've had conversations with a darn good German scientist by the name of Dr. Drachenblut, and we've also discussed quantum computers. And, and the thing that fascinated me, and I even forwarded this article to you, and this came from Google. Okay, this wasn't some little, makeshift company, somebody working out of their mother's basement or anything like that. This was coming from Google, where they're working with quantum computers, and they're able to, come up with solutions to problems that would take a supercomputer. I think to quote them was like 5 billion years, and you know, I Mobius, I had this question. I was on a show with a computer scientist out of California, and I asked him, we were talking about quantum computers, and I said, well, I kind of look at it as a perspective, from the observer, from the operator's perspective, the human's perspective. Yeah, the quantum computer may have taken a few minutes to come up with a solution to that problem, but from the perspective of the quantum computer, it may have been thousands, if not millions of years. Now, what do you think about that one?
I've read that Google article and it's kind of mind blowing. And when asked, impressed to explain how their device can do the work in 5 seconds that a supercomputer said it would take 5 billion years, they said the best explanation that they could offer is that it was a multiverse and that it was tapping into potentially almost infinite universes as it processed, that it was in a super state. And super meant that it had access at the same moment to infinite universes. And so that kind of gives you a hint of how much of an illusion not only our reality is, but maybe infinite realities that coexist. So within that time frame of 5 seconds, that it got a solution that would take 5 billion years, it processed all the universes. But here's what I would add to that. Oh, I love this statement. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Arthur C. Clarke. You know, and and that's what gets me with this stuff. I'm starting to accept it. It's not really anything magical. It's just the way it is. We just live in it, and we're just becoming aware of how fascinating the universe truly is. And I think you and I were having this conversation. How could you have multiverses? And I was under the premise, and you and I, we may have some disagreement about the frequency or whatever, but I was under the premise that this reality that we're in operates on a certain frequency. I was told, and I know this may be totally wrong, but I was told that the frequency of this universe is somewhere around 22 trillion times a second. I think you told me that was somewhere near the radar, uh, uh, that's towards
I
radar or something.
radar frequency.
Yeah,
That would be gigahertz. So 22 gigahertz. I don't really recognize this in those terms. I think I would jump to something more like string theory. But again, that's not exactly the way I would see it either. But if there are infinite universes, I mean, think about an infinite amount of things that can be different. There's some universes the Confederate War won, and there's some wars that the Nazis won, and there's some that don't have humans, and there's some that dinosaurs are still walking around. Infinite possibilities. So
yeah. Well, how could they coexist? And that was the big question. And you and I think this universe, we'll just go with, say it resonates at 22 trillion times. We'll just go
okay,
with that number. Just say we have a number. It really is irrelevant to this argument.
it
Okay.
doesn't
All
matter.
right.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if there's another universe that resonates at a different frequency, now, just like on a band, an AM radio band, you have like two stations that are side by side, but they're different frequencies, so they don't they don't, one doesn't bleed into the other, and vice versa, and but they're separate. And you really for all intents and purposes, that other radio station doesn't exist until you tune into that frequency. All
You're
right.
resonant with it. Yes, until your electronic device is resonant with it, you are not aware of its existence. So I think you are making a pretty good comparison.
Yeah. So if with that being said, if each reality is working on a different frequency, in my mind, that means that they all could occupy quote unquote the same universe. In other words, you could have limitless universes that are all on different frequencies. They're all in the same quote unquote space. What do you think of that hypothesis?
You would change the definition of space to equal the whole band. And so, in that context, I would agree, but they also still exist for the most part independently. But there are some times that we have weird things happen where there seems to be almost like they bump, and time to time things interact and distort or make little changes. And I think that would be consistent. I mean, sometimes you're listening to an AM station and there's a little bit of interference or meteorites pass by and ionize the atmosphere, and suddenly you're listening to a Mexican station. So I think that in general, your analogy is correct, along with the times that things get a little bit out of the ordinary may also explain it. So I think that's a pretty good explanation.
Yeah, I mean, and for this multiverse thing, I think that is it possible? Hell yeah, it's possible. I believe it's true. As to whether or not we bumped into one, I mean that's definitely an argument there. I mean, for example, this thing with the Mandela Effect, and what I love about this is, you actually have a baseline here when it comes to, for your example, Star Wars. You were a Star Wars geek, Star Trek geek. You had all the memorabilia, you built the models, you had the posters, yeah, yeah, yeah. You had all the stuff. So you had a reference. You knew how things looked, and you could compare them to the way things look now. Now, may I ask, in your humble opinion, has reality changed when it comes to Star Wars? Concerning the way things look, things that were said in movies, that kind of thing.
I hate this question. This is a question that I avoid whenever possible. And so you hit me with it. We're on a show. But I'm going to answer honestly. Um, there are certain things that you and I, and we have a friend named Rich who was in the intelligence community, pretty high ranking, and we all have noted things that we seem to note has changed. Now, if the timeline has changed, the question is, why do we not, within the timeline, retroactively see this change forever and are a part of it? But yet we see that, the difference. And I think, the shortness of the Panama Canal to us is now long and it's no longer east to west. We see a lot of things, but the Star Wars thing, I had a model that had a very high resolution photo and it was exact of C3PO. And now C3PO, even in the original movies, has a miscolored leg. And I absolutely know that I detailed this as a kid exact with the photo. And it was like, really high resolution photo of the actor in costume. So I have no explanation for a significant amount of things that you love pointing them out to me and just dropping my jaw because, this is not the information that we had, in school. And I love to ask people about the WW1 event where supposedly German, like terrorists blew up the Statue of Liberty. Nobody seems to remember this, but if you go and look it up, this is actually why we had internment camps for the Japanese. And nobody remembers this as a part of our history. And yet it seems to be significant now. And I'm baffled because I was never taught this in school.
Yeah, we have a mutual friend, a cryptic guy, and his. I think he has like a master's in American history and that kind of thing. And this was news to him. About as the Black Tom. event, Black Tom Island. What happened was German saboteurs off a U-boat. It's basically a munitions depot that we were supplying munitions for I think it was for England and France during World War One, and then they come over, they blow the place up. They had like a giant piece of shrapnel. It goes across the harbor, and I think it damaged the torch of the Statue of Liberty. And that's the funny thing. Talk about the Statue of Liberty. I've talked to people that swear up and down they have walked into the torch. Okay, it's like a little stairway through the arm, and they get to the torch. I've talked to other people that said they don't remember, or they said it was closed. But I know for a fact there are people there that said, yes, I've been to the torch. Well, that's impossible because that damn thing's been closed down since World War One. I think they opened it back up after it was renovated. That's like for limited visitation, that kind of thing, during the Reagan administration. And so it's just the kind of stuff that goes on here is just really, it's bizarre, and it's very strange. You know, the one that gets me, and even cryptic guy, I had a cousin of mine who was in the Coast Guard who also verified the very same thing, And I asked him, said, the cryptic guy was very familiar with the geography of the Caribbean, and so was my cousin. And they looked at this thing, and they said, "Well, that's not right. Cuba was a lot smaller, and it was like south of Key West, Florida. But if you look at it now, it's the size of Florida itself, the state of Florida, and it's blocking, or it's right in the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico. It was never like that when I was a kid. It was like a little rinky-dink island, out there that was just causing havoc, with being a little play toy of the Soviet Union, causing havoc to the U.S., just playing a Cold War. And that's what I remember Cuba being as a kid. And so it's just, the way things are now, completely different. And going back to the Panama Canal, I verified this, Mobius. I verified this with a guy who was from Colombia, South America. Matter of fact, coincidentally, he was only like maybe 10 miles from the Panamanian border where it touches into Colombia. And I showed him a picture of the way Panama looks now. He said, that's not right, because the way it looks now, it looks like a snake. But back then, I remember it being like a straight slither of land with a slight bent that connected into South America. What is your recollection?
Okay. We always paid attention. We had movies in school, and there's still part of this black and white movie that was, one of the amazing achievements of mankind. The Panama Canal is black and white. It has lots of explosions and dynamite. It has the trains taking the debris out and making it. And, I paid attention. It was just relatively, like you said, east to west type thing. It was not very long. Of course, it used a few lakes, but it was not, it was not a huge thing. It was a shorter thing, and it was an obvious connection. But I'm going to jump. Somebody's going to say my memory is off. You're remembering incorrectly. Okay, our intelligence friend who's high ranking, he went on vacation 20 something years ago to Panama. He knows how long he was there. He is a pilot. He is skilled with a compass, and he can fly without any instruments. And he drove during his vacation the entire Panama Canal. He knows how long it was. He knows how long he was there. He came back. It is now longer than his ability to have driven it while he was there. And that simply does not make any sense. He was able to do it easily in one day. Now, that would not be possible. So you've got me on the Mandela effect, and it is one of the least comfortable, because someone that has a memory that is consistent with his timeline will absolutely dismiss this as being, like insane. So this is one of those areas where you may know something, but it's really hard. But the one thing that I'm kind of happy about that I don't understand, I was in school, and like we were all having to do like maybe second or third grade, just as a pop assignment by a substitute teacher, logos. And he was like tearing out things out of magazines, handing them to kids, saying, "Here, you draw this logo." So he ran out of magazines. And so I happened to have my t-shirt with me from Jim. And so he assigned me to do my logo, which was Fruit of the Loom. And it had a frickin' cornucopia on it. And so I drew it in the little fruits and whatever as best I could. I'm not an artist, but I remember what I saw. Now, some people have the original t-shirts with the cornucopia. Some people have them without in majority. And they say they have never used a logo with the cornucopia. I simply do not understand. I also don't understand if they didn't make it, why some people still have some that are. But mine sure did, because I know what I drew, and it just doesn't make sense.
Oh yeah, I had I remember that very very well. Hell, I remember the commercials back in the I think around like either the early '70s or the late '60s of Fruit of the Loom. Okay, you had like different people, dressed up as different fruits or whatever, and yeah, I remember that. And yes, it did have a cornucopia, but now in this reality, it doesn't. It's just little things like that. And the reason why we kind of go with this Mandela thing, and I've noticed that it's probably about 1 out of 5 people think the way we do, and then the other 4 out of 5, uh, they seem to kind of dismiss it. But my question is, how come is it that we all share the same memory? If there wasn't anything to it, why do we share that same identical memory? Were we all misinformed? I mean, hell, we all come from different backgrounds. I mean, we didn't go to the same schools or have the same teachers or even the same families. We all had different backgrounds, but we all remember the same damn thing.
I've
And my,
actually
go ahead.
taken as a sign of the quantum universe and multiple universes. And I think that some of us actually seem to recall a slightly different timeline. And I don't know why, how you wake up on a different timeline with a slightly different memory. None of us have a completely different memory. Like we woke up and, we think that Rome still won and Rome dominates the world or something. It's just very insignificant things that are bizarre. But here's what I take from this. This is the only way that I can comprehend the wishing machine works is it allows you to adjust your consciousness and to tune in something and manifest it within your timeline. And it doesn't matter how bizarre it is. It may be, it's harder to do larger things, but anything is possible. And I find the people I know that have memories of these slight changes actually seem to validate to me that you can actually retune your consciousness and have a different reality. I suspect in 50 or 100 years that what I'm saying will be found to be very common and it won't sound insane or magic. It will actually be scientifically validated at some point. And I
Um,
think I think that Google, the article where they said that their 5 seconds is equal to, like 5 billion years of processing, but it's using an infinite amount of multiverses, might be your first hint at what I'm getting at.
mhm. Exactly, exactly. And I think that's the reason why, like you said, why radionics works. Okay, we have the human consciousness, the observer. We have a tool here, and what you do, you're tuning this thing in for a certain outcome, for a certain thing to happen that normally would not happen. And the reason why I have this big thing about quantum computers, because I look at them as quasi time machines. Okay, that's what I'm looking at. Space and time is irrelevant with a quantum computer, the way I understand it. And that's the reason why we're able to do calculations, like you said, in short periods of time that normally would take years, if not millions of years, to do it. And and so, with that said, using radionics to tap into the power of the quantum computer, and I think again, is the human mind is one of those things that can interface with a quantum computer because of the things they have to do, the protocols that they have to go through in order to both manufacture and operate it. I mean, I'm sure you probably heard the same thing. with the like before they press the start button for an operation with a quantum computer. When they press that start button, it's basically a random timer. The operator, the person that pressed the button, that has no idea when the operation will start. It could be 5 seconds from now, it could be 5 minutes from now, it could be 5 hours from now. No idea. And the reason why they do that is to keep the consciousness of the operator himself by pressing that button to keep that just that idea out of the scenario. Have you heard this yourself, or maybe I've heard, been maybe I just misremember.
I would not be surprised because at the quantum level, any interaction of the observer affects the outcome. And I would say that my theory is that the wishing machine and the mind actually work together to create a quantum computer. But you're going away and you're leaving the wishing machine as the observer, and you are no longer consciously acting on it. So, what you're doing is you're creating the same effect. You said you don't know if it's going to be 5 seconds, 5 minutes, or 5 hours when the effect takes place. I think you just described the wishing machine and the human brain and what the way the interaction occurs and the outcome exactly.
Yeah, whenever I operate a machine, I yes, we're humans who love to try to get a time frame. Okay, if I tune this machine, how long does this machine have to be in operation for this thing to happen? Doesn't mean the operation is going to become a part of reality. It just means how long do I need to leave that machine in operation in order for this thing to happen? And and again, the way I operate these machines, I go through the protocol, tune them for a certain outcome, uh, and then part of that protocol, the last part of it is to test for how long the machines to stay in operation for that for that particular outcome. After I do this, I really have no more thought of the machine. I don't even give it a second thought. I just let it do its job. I may glance at it from time to time, but do I really have any kind of intense thought or try to project anything to that machine? No, I don't. I just let it do its job. And that's how I work with this thing. I try to keep, yes, I'm intermingled with it, but then again, I try to not overthink it. In other words, I just set it and forget it. That's basically how I do a majority of my operations. Some of them I may be a little bit more emotionally involved in. I may devote little bit more time and emotion or effort into it because of the value it has to me. Okay, but for the most part, 98%, 99% of the operations I do, again, I just set a machine and just let it do its job. And that's it, nothing more. I don't do anything. If opportunities come about that will help, make this thing become a reality, well, of course, I will, pursue them because that's part of the wishing machine. I look at it in a lot of ways as opportunities. I think you were telling me the story about uh, you were wanting a certain kind of chocolate, and it came out of Europe. You tune a machine, and within 24 hours, you got some guy driving up in your driveway, and what does he have? He has that very same chocolate that you were wishing for. I mean, you had to be there at the house in order to meet that guy. You had to interact with him in order for this to become a reality. You had to play a part in this. When it came to getting that particular candy at your doorstep, and so it's just little things like that. And again, that's the thing I try to tell people: do not overthink this thing. Just set it, forget it, and see what happens, and you'll be surprised. I don't know. What do you think?
I think normally as an engineer that I am the worst person to use a wishing machine because I always try to analyze and overthink. It's when I drop my guard and I'm tired and I'm emotional that I've seen it work just amazingly. You gave the chocolate example. My other example is I was messing with one and I was out of Coca-Cola and I extremely wanted a Coke. And so I played around before I went to bed and I set my intent and I wanted a damn Coca-Cola to be waiting on me on this couch when I woke up. And that's pretty exacting. It's I'm not even sure that I was playfully doing this, but I left the box and I went to bed. I think my actual intent was to go to the grocery store the next day, but I wanted a Coke right then, not even like when I got up. But when I got up, I came downstairs and I couldn't believe it. There was a Coca-Cola sitting on the couch, and there was a note from a friend of mine who I never hardly ever see, who had come by, let themselves in, and just wanted to say hello and brought me a Coke to say hi and left it. It's even in the spot that I pointed. And, I knew that this was like, I mean, this is impossible. I could have said anything, your value $1 million, a Star Trek phaser that worked, whatever, you are the one that creates value and complexity. A Coke coming from nowhere is just as complicated as $1 million. But there it was sitting at the spot. My wish was fulfilled, and I have no logical answers. Like, I don't see this person sometimes once a year, but to come and leave a Coke with no idea what I had done, no idea the wish, nothing. She became an innocent participant in fulfilling what I did. And so the process doesn't actually matter. It's just impossible that you can demand an exact object in an exact place when you wake up and it be there. But yet I experienced it and I can't deny it.
Yeah, one thing. There was one thing that really that you went through with the machine, and it was concerning. I think it was a Star Trek movie memorabilia or something, or you had like a gripe against the set director. And I don't want to steal your thunder. Would you mind telling the audience that story? And I think after that we'll start to wrap things up.
You just love my crazy thing. I absolutely cannot stand new track. I cannot stand anything that was made by Abrams or Kurtzman or any of the most recent shows. I am an old school Star Trek fan all the way up to 2009 and nothing after. But the movies that came out, they have barcode readers and just, really crappy tech on the bridge. And I said, I want to find out who the heck did all this, who the prop person was, who the creator was, and I want to tell them that this sucks. And that why would you do this? And I made a wish to talk to this person. And I have no idea who this person is, and I had actually never looked it up. I was contacted on Facebook by a guy who said that he had been laid off, that a movie had been expected, and that it was not being done, and he needed some extra income. And he had some of the old Star Trek, the screen prints that you use with a light board for control panel stuff, and he wanted to sell them, so he had some extra income. And he told me to look up his IMDb fact sheet, and I thought nothing about it. And I looked it up, and there in the credits, he's the freaking guy that built all the Abrams stuff. And I was like, what? So I wrote him back, and I'm like, oh my God, I've always wanted to talk to you and tell you. And I said, I don't want to be insultive, but everything in the new Trek movies, especially the Abrams Bridge, just sucks. You've got blow dryers on there, you've got barcode readers. Why would you do this? I mean, it's just horrible. And the guy was like reasonable and nice. And he wrote me back and he says, we do what we're ordered to do. We build what we're ordered to build. It wasn't my idea. It was laid out, and I'm the guy that, glued it together and made it work. So if you don't like it, I'm really not the exact person to talk to. You need to call up Abrams and tell him he sucks. And you know what? That's another conversation. And I was stunned because I never in a million years would have expected that after making this wish, I would say within a week that this guy contacted me. So actually, yeah, that actually happened. He's actually a friend of mine to this day. So, that was not quite what I expected.
Yeah, and again, that's another thing I tell people when you set up a wish, it's going to have its own time, and it's going to come out of left field. There's going to be little things, little opportunities that normally would not have happened that will help you fulfill your operation or the goal or the wish that you have, and it's up to you to take action. I like to, demonstrate absurdity by being absurd. And, I always gave this, this, what if, you know, I could sit there and tune a machine to wish for a million wishing machines or radionic boxes to be in my front yard tomorrow. I could do that. But the only way in hell it's ever going to happen is if I build them or if I buy them. And there's not enough in the world to do that right now, I assure you. So the point of it is, yes, you can wish for anything, but you have to apply a little energy for it toward that goal. And when you do that, the doors start to open. It's amazing. I was looking for all kinds of people with certain skill sets, and eventually they just kind of walk in my path, and there you go. I'm off to the next level, and it's just amazing what happens. And I look at it. I think some guy said you ought to rename this thing the opportunity machine, and I think that's probably a valid point on a lot of things. But I've seen what these things can do. I mean, it covers the gambit from uh, financial relationships, legal matters, uh, whatever. It covers the gambit as to what these things are capable of doing, and I think it all is inside of the operator. It's all in the mind of the operator. That's the most important part. And again, I don't think people realize just how powerful they are. And it's nothing special about it. It's just the way we were built. It's part of our DNA. And I think the more my opinion of this, and maybe you agree or disagree, but I think that one time we knew how powerful we were, and it's just been basically beaten out of us, metaphorically speaking. It's no longer taught, the skill sets that we have, the things that we were able to do, and it's kind of shunned. It's looked upon as being woo woo and whatever. No, it's nothing woo woo about it. I mean, if you want to look at a paranormal book, the Bible, for example, is full of you know uh, the paranormal. I mean, there's all types of things that go on in that book that they're paranormal, but it's around us, and I think people just need to realize that, hey, open your eyes and just really see what just where what you have the abilities to do. And all radionics, again, all it is just a tool. It's just a way of simply setting up, turning a few dials and making things happen that normally would not happen. So, what can I say? Uh, well, on that note, Mobius, before we uh, before we shut things down here, yeah, go ahead and tell everybody about the Sunshine Simple and about the night vision. And after that, I think we're going to call it a night.
Well, Sunshine Simple is a unit, it's even EMP proof, and you can find it at sunshinesimple.com. And probably I'm not going to find any Russian second gen night vision, but if you want some third gen custom made night vision, go to paratemporal, PARATEMPORAL.com, and I will be glad to make you a pair. And my last thing for you is you said Bible, and it said that man was created in God's likeness and image. And certainly we think of God as a creator. So I would say that one of the main things that we may not be aware of, that we were made as also creators. And I certainly think that we are beginning to see that we can tap into this. And this may be part of the future, that we understand that this mysticism of the human mind becomes more and more a part of the creation process, and that hardcore science and what we think of mind are actually very connected.
Well said, young man. Well said. And you know, I really think this has been one of our best shows so far. I want this to be an open conversation, and I think we touched upon some things that really kind of hit home. I think we were more direct about this, and we were able to kind of give people a better insight as to what the heck this technology is that we're working on, and how reality truly is, not what we think it is. Just by the fact, I mean, with uranium, that alone, that one of the first things you were talking about in the show, that alone should make you scratch your head and wonder how, by merely observing something, it ceases to be radioactive. That makes no damn sense.
Nope. So this has been a good show, and I've enjoyed doing it. And let's get some good feedback. Don't just sit there and listen. Tell
Oh
us what
yeah,
you tell us what you think. We enjoy hearing it.
yes, exactly. And please click the thumbs up button if you don't mind, and leaving comments. We love it. I read everything, every comment we get, and some of these I try to respond to, in private, and just it's just a pleasure. Uh, really, listening to people, or getting feedback from from the listeners of the show. And again, we put this thing together to provide you with information and kind of give you an insight as to how the heck this stuff works, why it works, and what you can do with it. And so, all right, well, with that said, everybody have a great day, and I shall talk to y'all later. Good day.